It's time. Time to get credit for the work you've done. Time to get the recognition you deserve. With Purdue Global, you can move forward in your career, for your family, and for yourself. You're worth the investment in yourself to earn a degree you're proud of, a degree that employers will respect. Purdue's online university is designed to support working adults like you who know it's never too late to accomplish your goals. It's never too late to make a comeback. It's time to start yours today at purdueglobal.edu.
Have you heard about Vyvgart, Efgartigimod alpha FCAB? Ask your neurologist if Vyvgart could be right for you and learn more at vyvgart.com/learn. That's VYVGART.com/learn. Brought to you by argenx.
This ad is about AT&T's deal on the new iPhone 15 Pro, and it's real, guaranteed. That's not always the case with other ads.
The view of a lifetime.
Only with a pricey upgrade.
Breathe in to find inner peace.
Then pay extra to remove the ads. At AT&T, we mean what we say. Learn how to get iPhone 15 Pro with titanium on us with eligible trade-in. Guaranteed. Connecting changes everything. AT&T.
See att.com/iPhone for details about the guaranteed trade-in promo for new and existing customers. Available for a limited time. Terms and restrictions apply.
This is the Jabberjaw Podcast Network, sponsored by Soundring. Visit jabberjawmedia.com for more shows like this one.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins. I'm driving to the city of Los Angeles, and that should probably indicate how crazy my life has been as of late. Because, normally I like to record these things in the comfort of my own home with my own recording studio and, 60-mile-per-hour traffic. In my case right now, 0-mile-per-hour traffic. Because, that's the name of the game here in Los Angeles. So anyways, the guest this week is Mark Palm. He plays in a band called Supercrush, and previously he's played in bands like Go It Alone, Black Breath, his own solo project called Devotion. This dude is by no stretch of the imagination like a household name, because the past couple weeks there's been some heavy hitters, so to speak. But Mark's story is so incredibly interesting that I would be remiss if I didn't ask him to appear on the show. He's definitely not one that does a ton of interviews, so I felt pretty lucky and privileged that he decided to, go really in depth and share his story because it is very unconventional. His thought process in regards to the way that he approaches life is not like everybody else's, even going against the grain of the whole, punk and hardcore community as well, sidestepping it, so to speak. So, more on Mark in a few moments. Let's get some other things at the top of the show out of the way. And I'd like to, of course, encourage you to check out jabberjawmedia.com. We are a part of their podcast network, and exciting things are happening over there. Shows are being developed. Other people are being introduced to other podcasts of this very medium that's focusing in on independent music. So I want to highlight a particular show because that's what I've been doing over the past couple of weeks. And this one in particular is from a previous guest of the show. His name is Shane Told. He sings for a band called Silverstein. And he does a show called Lead Singer Syndrome, which, as you can probably imagine, focuses in on lead singers on bands because Shane himself sings for the band Silverstein. So he's only got maybe about 3 or 4 episodes underneath his belt, and they're really good. He's definitely, finding his sea legs. Like, by no means am I calling the show bad, but, usually when you start off, you're kind of trying to figure out what it is you're actually going to speak to these people about. But Shane is definitely a very intelligent dude, asks good questions, and if you're interested in more dialogue similar to what this show is, go ahead and check out his show, because, it's worth it. So, I'd like to thank, again, Jabberjaw Media, and the presenting sponsor for this launch, soundrink.com, a live experience ticket thing. They are your spot for live experiences, from VIP packages to just straight up buying tickets to shows. It's a great company. They've got great customer service, and they don't, charge you out the wazoo in regards to service fees. So there you go. Thanks, Soundrink, and thank you, Jabberjaw Media. The reason I'm driving to Los Angeles and recording this in my car right now is I start a new job today. Woohoo! Exciting. It's been quite some time. My previous job, for those of you that are keeping count and track, is I worked at PETA 2 for about 6 years, just over 6 years. And now I'm working at a company called The Midroll. And The Midroll is actually the fine people who help me get and find advertisers for my podcast. And they've been a great partner for me for the past 2.5 years. And then an opportunity came up for me to potentially work with them. And that's what I'm doing. So I'm really excited. It's, there's a little bit of nerves flying around. I'm sure when you leave one job, which, realistically, I could have stayed at PETA 2 for the next 10, 15, 20 years if they would have me, of course. And I would have been fine because I enjoyed the job. But then it's weird when you kind of get to these fork-in-the-road moments where you feel like, I need a new challenge. There are better opportunities where it's like, in this case, they were going to pay me more money. I get to work from home full-time and all this other stuff that kind of made it even more difficult for me to ignore this offer. Ultimately, that's what I'm doing. So I'm excited. And I will give you an update next week on whether or not I failed miserably on my first day or I stumbled through and said, this guy, someone knows what he's doing. So, yes, the guest this week, like I said, is Mark Palm. I became aware of him in his band Go It Alone. And my producer, Tom Richfield, I don't want to say obsessed, but basically enjoys all of the recorded output that Mark has ever put himself out in. And he always kind of, when I say he, my producer, always kind of pushed me to be like, hey, you should get Mark on the show. You should get Mark on the show. And finally, I am delivering on that promise. We were trying to schedule this for quite some time, and he was busy traveling and doing a bunch of other stuff. But we connected, and I'm excited to bring you the conversation. So here is my discussion with Mark, and I will talk to you after the episode is over and, reveal some stuff.
We've never met in person, but we've been in the same room for years and years and years. We just haven't, been, hey, Mark, this is Ray, and vice versa. But
yeah, I was going to ask you if we had ever met in person.
No, we just we should have at this point, because we, whatever. I did Sound and Fury for a couple of years, and play. I want to say one of my bands played with you guys. No, actually, I was thinking of Sinking Ships, but regardless, we should have met by this point. And I always feel weird when you're like, oh yeah, so Go It Alone to me was kind of without overstating it, definitely like a revelation of bands that were kind of in that ilk because honestly it was a unique take on a tired genre. In general, this is something that I've kind of since that band I've followed your musical progression, and it seems to be that's like how you kind of approach most of your music writing and kind of creative output, where it's not necessarily that you're like breaking any molds per se, but you're putting your own very unique perspective on it, and then that kind of differentiates you from the other bands that are kind of in your same either scene or musical genre or whatever. I know it's kind of a big question to start things off, but do you feel that that's kind of like accurately reflects the way that you either approach writing music or kind of the way that you think about these things?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, I've played in plenty of bands that were highly derivative of other bands from the past, so I don't think everything that I've done is like particularly unique, but I do always try to inject like at least a certain aspect of my own personality into everything that I'm doing. So even if the music is very generic, sometimes it's just like a lyrical angle or even just like an approach to the like visual aesthetic that might be more of an indication of my personality rather than just a complete rip off of something that's already existed in the past.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I think, like you said, I think when we're all young and attempting to be creative, obviously we're only looking at the things that you can kind of pull directly from, i.e. the bands that came before you, that you're just being like, yeah, I just want to sound like Unbroken meets Snapcase or whatever. Like all you're doing is pulling those musical references, but then usually, obviously, when you're younger, you're kind of left to your own devices as far as the people that you play with. So it's like,
right.
Sometimes it's interesting because obviously it's like, oh yeah, the drummer we had was like, he was just the only person in town, and he was kind of the metal dude, so he brought a unique take to it or whatever. So yeah, I see what you're saying, where it's like you start to have these influences that probably never would have happened if it was like, simply just 5 or 4 kids in a room that all liked Gorilla Biscuits and that was it.
Yeah, that's definitely the case from growing up in Vancouver, because it was always like a really small scene. There wasn't a huge pool of musicians to pull from. There was never a big enough scene to really have like separate micro genre scenes. Like there was never enough bands to have like a youth crew show or like a metalcore show or like, you know what I'm saying? So so as a result, like I grew up going to see like Submission Hold, but at the same time I was into like 10-yard fight and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I think when we formed Go It Alone, even though the basis of the band musically was like coming from kind of like a, I don't know, late 80s, I guess youth crew hardcore, that was kind of like the basis of what we were trying to do. I think we were, maybe even unbeknownst to ourselves at the time, we were incorporating a bunch of influences that were like well beyond the confines of that particular subgenre.
That's obviously why I think people kind of gravitated towards you, especially when, after the first EP and the kind of, the growing pains in regards to, just getting out there and playing shows and becoming more accomplished. I mean, I doubt that you would ever refer to yourself as a musician during that time, but as you started to grow musically, and that's why I think people, really latched onto your band for the the full length, because it was just such a weird conglomeration of a lot of different things that ultimately led people to be like, oh yeah, this is different than just your typical, like you said, 10-yard fight, old school hardcore release from a full length perspective.
It's funny that you say that about the LP, because in retrospect, I actually think the first LP does not, at least to me, does not stand the test of time particularly well. But it's funny because that was by far our most our highest selling record, or our most widely, that was our most popular release at the time.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting to me, because that's probably my least favorite.
Right. Well, yeah, basically when people obviously get to know you from one particular musical release, and then that's kind of, your identity for, years to come. And obviously now we're still talking about it, that there's that sort of mental rut that you get into where it's just like, oh yeah, but I was really proud of Histories or whatever, everything else that you've done since then or whatever, not illegitimizing everything that you've done since then from my perspective, but just speaking for myself, I think what it captured for me was the fact that it was, for lack of a better term, it just actually captured emotion.
Yeah.
You definitely felt like, that there's no difficulty in being angry or being sad, but it was just the way that you guys were obviously putting that on display, I think kind of separated you from a lot of those bands, because it basically didn't feel like you were going through the motions, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even if people love that album and don't like anything else I do, I just appreciate when people take an interest in anything that I've done. So
yeah,
I take it as a compliment. I definitely don't try to distance myself from any of the bands or records that I've made in the past. I appreciate the fact that people cared about that record at the time and still do.
Right. Yeah, you're not talking people out of it. But you're like, no, that thing sucks. You check out what I'm doing right now.
The one thing I'll say, the one thing that I do like about that record is that I really think it's very of its time, and I think that period of hardcore and that time in hardcore probably won't really age particularly well. But I do appreciate that it's a snapshot of that time and place, and is not just simply a carbon copy of a previous time that I never even got to experience. You know what I mean? It's really, when you hear it, it sounds very much like it came out in 2005.
Right. Yeah, there are certain releases that kind of fall, like you said, that maybe don't age very well, but then you can at least point your finger to pretty much almost exactly when that came out, where you're just like, yes, this sounds distinctly 1997 or whatever. And
exactly, yeah.
And even though, like, yeah, maybe sonically it's not able to last longer than whatever the few years after it, because you would be like, oh, the recording quality is so much better now or whatever. But it's like, you know, whatever. You can listen to a band like Chokehold and be like, oh my gosh, like their recording quality is atrocious and you can hardly even listen to it. But you're like, yeah, that probably came out in like 1994, 95. And it's like, yeah, of course you can point that out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But you mentioned Vancouver. So were you born and raised there, or where did you come up?
Yeah. I was born and raised in Vancouver, which is kind of unique actually. Like myself and Lucas, the drummer from Go It Alone, we're kind of the only couple people that I can think of off the top of my head that actually grew up like in Vancouver proper.
It is a weird. I never got a chance to tour or play there with my own bands, but I went to visit a band when I was working at a record label. I was trying to sign them, and I went up to Vancouver to watch them play. And it's such a weird city, and I'm sure you obviously have a lot of emotions about it. But I just got this really, you know, like whatever, landing at the airport and like kind of going through certain areas of the city where it was just like, oh my gosh, like, you know, this is beautiful. There's this, you know, whatever, I don't know if I'd call it a palace, but whatever. It's like the, you know, the beautiful grounds of, you know, some official looking building, and then, you know, some of the touristy sections. And then all of a sudden it's like you cross over into this just like, dude, this kind of feels like Detroit. Like this feels really, really bizarre. Like you can just tell that there's a lot of drugs in the area. And granted, I guess you could argue that for almost any music venue that we've probably played at, because it's not like the music venues that we played at are in a nice part of town. But I just got this very distinct class vibe of that I wasn't expecting, because everyone usually says like, oh, Vancouver, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful. So like, it was my 12-hour experience reflective of anything that you can identify with?
Oh, big time. Yeah, that's like that's the classic dichotomy of Vancouver, you know, which I experienced big time growing up, because I grew up kind of on the southwest part of town, in like, you know, a very safe, quasi-suburban neighborhood, even though it was, you know, within the city. But like you said, I spent a lot of time going to shows on the downtown east side, and spent a lot of time hanging out there, and ended up moving there later. So, you know, from a very young age, I was exposed to, you know, both of those aspects of the Vancouver experience. And
so what was your family structure like growing up, like mom and dad, brothers and sisters?
Yeah, my parents are still together. I have an older sister. And my family, it's pretty much just kind of my immediate family that's in Vancouver. I have a lot of family in Minneapolis and family in Sweden. But in Vancouver, it's just my folks and my sister.
What did they do as you were growing up from a profession standpoint?
My father works for the Parks Board. He's still working. He's an architect who helps design community centers, public swimming pools, that sort of thing. And my mother's worked in nonprofit, like, for as long as I can remember. When I was a kid, she worked for the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. And she just retired recently, but the last, I guess, decade or so of her career, she worked for the Multiple Sclerosis Society.
Wow, that is very selfless, as they say. Obviously, nonprofit work is not glamorous, so your mom giving back like that's pretty rad.
Yeah, it's funny actually, because she did that sort of work, you know, my entire life when I was growing up, and I always I guess I didn't really think about it that much, because I just thought of her as my mom, you know. Mm-hmm. I never really saw the professional side of her life. I just saw the home life side of her life.
You just view the work that your parents do as like, obviously that's like the job. Like you don't really, dive deep into what they're doing until later.
Exactly. Yeah. When you're a kid, I guess you just don't take any interest in that. But it was really cool, because when she retired a couple years ago, I attended her retirement party at her work, and it was super eye-opening, because there was all these coworkers of hers who got up to speak about her, what she had contributed, and how sorry they were to see her go and stuff. Right. And it really, it took me, I was like 30 years old to really grasp that she had this whole other side to her life that I hadn't ever really taken a very deep interest in.
Right.
And it was I was kind of shocked, and I felt really proud of her. And it was a whole new side of someone that I had known my entire life.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
No, I mean, it's important that you mention that, because I definitely think that there's a conception of this very adversarial relationship that obviously sons and daughters have with their parents. Not even particularly towards the independent music scene, but obviously you can trace it across the teenage life in general. And so once you start to get out of that and realize that your parents not only obviously had a life before you, and they had all these wait, you were interested in stuff, you were. It's it totally, yeah. Obviously, like you said, it's it's kind of an emotional in a way, because you're just oh wow, I could have woken up to this a little bit earlier and been wow, you're you're extremely important, not only to me but to a lot of other people. It's great.
Yeah, I definitely had kind of a somewhat tense relationship with my parents as a young teenager. I was a teenage punk rocker, and I hated going to high school, and I looked I looked like a freak. So I had kind of a classic teenage punk combative relationship with my parents. But then I think that only lasted for a few years, and even as a very young adult, I kind of took my mom aside, explained to her even though I've chosen a very different path in life than you do and Dad, it's not because I disapprove of what you're doing, or think that you guys have some kind of corrupt lifestyle, which is kind of a classic teenage punk thing, to be oh, I never want to be like my parents, they're so fucked up or whatever. So I made sure to make it clear to her that I was don't think that the way I'm living my life is out of rebellion or is some kind of critique on how you're living your life. I'm actually very impressed and humbled by what you've done with your life. It's just very different than what I've chosen to do with mine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's a really important distinction to make. And I mean, honestly, that's a pretty mature thing for you to be able to kind of recognize, because yeah, I do think that, there is that notion of I'll never be like my parents because they're total sellouts. They've totally bought into this horrific system that I'm doing everything I can to rally against, and whatever practices I'm adopting and whatever philosophical beliefs I have. But then, but to be able to make that distinction of no, I'm doing this because I've chosen this path, rather than think that you are just a completely worthless human being or whatever, Yeah.
It's hilarious in retrospect. I can think of times when I was 15 and a brand new vegan, and just being so critical of my mother for eating meat or something like that. But meanwhile, she's spent her whole life helping people who are visually impaired, or helping people with multiple sclerosis, or helping, she's spent her whole life doing valuable work. But meantime, it's a teenager with kind of blinders on to get on a horse and be very critical of others.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let me tell you, the holidays are awesome. They've got some great moments, whether it's spending time with friends and family, gift giving, all of the things. I personally love Christmas lights. I can't wait to put them up. It just makes me feel warm inside. But there are moments where it's man, it's overwhelming, or I'm feeling really alone or sad. All of the things that just, can kind of compound it during the holidays. That is why you need to take a beat and maybe take that moment for yourself. Give the gift of time to yourself. And that's honestly why I love dipping into therapy. That's why I also love working with BetterHelp, because they make finding a therapist online so dang easy. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Like I said, it's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, and then you get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for any reason at no additional charge. Please, in this season of giving, give to yourself as well with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Ray to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Ray for 10% off your first month. Take care of yourself, please.
This episode is brought to you by Toyota. We all agree that reducing carbon emissions is a good thing, and once again, Toyota is leading the way. We hear a lot about fully electric vehicles, and Toyota has them, with more on the way. But we also know a BEV is not for everyone, whether it's because of cost, range, or concerns about finding a charging station when you need it. Plus, the raw materials used to manufacture batteries are limited. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future, in vehicles and in manufacturing plants too in the years ahead. The materials used to make just one long-range battery for an EV could be used to make batteries for 6 plug-in hybrids or 90 gas-electric hybrids. That's why Toyota's position today is electrified, diversified, empowering you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint with the vehicle that's right for you. A hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or battery EV. So shop, learn more, and get details at toyota.com/beyond0. Toyota, let's go places.
I have diabetes. I'm at risk for pneumococcal pneumonia.
I have asthma. I'm at risk too.
If you're 19 or older with chronic conditions like asthma, diabetes, COPD, or heart disease, or are 65 or older, you are at increased risk for pneumococcal pneumonia. Ask your doctor or pharmacist about Prevnar 20, pneumococcal 20-valent conjugate vaccine, a Pfizer vaccine that can help protect you against pneumococcal pneumonia in just one dose. Even if you've already been vaccinated with other pneumonia vaccines, Prevnar 20 may help provide added protection. Prevnar 20 is approved for adults to help prevent infections from 20 strains of the bacteria that cause pneumococcal pneumonia. Continued approval may depend on a supportive study. Don't get Prevnar 20 if you've had a severe allergic reaction to the vaccine or its ingredients. Adults with weakened immune systems may have a lower response to the vaccine. Side effects include pain and swelling at the injection site, fatigue, headache, muscle, and joint pain. For full prescribing information, please call 1-855-213-2138 or visit Prevnar20.com.
Right. I'm willing to cut you down pretty quick, Mom.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as you mentioned, like obviously the sort of kid that you find yourself being when you were developing your identity was definitely in relation to music. And, how did that get kind of introduced to you? Because usually there's the sort of, I like to call it a gatekeeper, where it's like, either older brother or sister or someone kind of showing it to you. So who kind of presented it to you, or was it just one of those things you tripped across yourself?
Well, I didn't really come from like a particularly musical family. Like neither my parents or my sister are musicians, and there wasn't a great deal of music around when I was growing up. Like I can remember on family trips and stuff like that, like in the car, we had some tapes, like we would listen to Carole King and the Beach Boys and stuff like that. My dad was also pretty into jazz, which I thought was kind of cool as a kid, but it was also a little over my head at the time. And then in the early 90s, as a kid, I was just like drawn to anything that I thought was cool. And I really had no concept of what actually was cool, but I just thought mohawks were cool. I'd never heard punk music, but I thought like I must have seen some punks like on TV or something. And I was like, oh, okay, that's like what cool people look like. Mm-hmm. I thought people with mohawks were cool. I thought tattoos were cool. I didn't know anyone with a tattoo, but somehow I got it in my head that was cool. I thought that skateboarding was cool. I didn't know anyone who skateboarded. But somehow for a young age, at least visually, I was like attracted to, I guess, kind of like countercultural things. And then when kind of the grunge thing blew up, that was when I first started being exposed to, I wouldn't say underground music, but at least music that had roots in the underground. It's funny now looking back because at the time I don't think I realized that I was listening to bands that came from punk or came from like an underground scene. At the time I thought that was just mainstream rock, like I would hear Nirvana on the radio. And I just thought that was mainstream rock music, which it was at the time, but I didn't realize that it was coming from a punk background. And likewise, I was super into the band Sugar because I heard them on the radio. And it wasn't until many years later that I found out that, it's this guy from Husker Du. And this band is like this long lineage that connects them to punk and hardcore. I had no idea at the time, but that was, I guess, my initial, when I was first exposed to like, I guess kind of aggressive music, mm-hmm. was Nirvana, like I said, Sugar, Soundgarden, all that kind of stuff.
Right. I find it interesting just hearing what you were mentioning. The you were drawn to the aesthetics, because I definitely think that there's kind of a common theme, whether or not it's like you're attracted to this particular like look, or whether you're attracted to what you deem, like you said, as like a cool lifestyle. Like I distinctly remember like going through, you know, the warehouse or Tower Records or whatever, and be like walking by like a Cannibal Corpse record and being like, what the fuck is that, dude? And like, again, just drawn to the aesthetics, where I was just like, oh, this looks sweet. Like, I have no context for, you know, in the same fashion as you were with like, you know, Sugar or whatever. Not to say that I ever had the courage to actually take the Cannibal Corpse tape up and purchase it, because it would have been immediately thrown out by my parents if they found it. But there's definitely that sort of attraction to like, this feels like something I shouldn't be into, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you were definitely into some more intense shit than me if you were drawn to Cannibal Corpse and I was drawn to Sugar. But
yeah, no, that's true. I think it was about, like I said, it was I had no idea what they sounded like. It was definitely just like me being an 11-year-old being like, dude, I like Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, and then like, what's Cannibal Corpse? Like, I had no bearing for anything. It was just like, oh yeah, this looks risque.
Yeah, it was all kind of like forbidden.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
So, like I was saying, I guess that was my first experience with like, you know, quasi underground music. And then my first exposure to, I guess, what you would call punk was, I guess it was 94, when there was that massive punk explosion with Green Day and Offspring and Rancid and Bad Religion and all that stuff. So that was the first, like, I guess, fully punk music that I got into. You know, I heard Green Day and Offspring on the radio, on rock radio. And then from there, I was like just doing everything that I could to uncover more information about punk music. Mm-hmm. Like there wasn't a lot of access. That was like in the very infancy of the internet being widely available. So that wasn't really like an easy access point for me. And there weren't any punk rockers at my school. There was one, I think I was in grade. It was the summer before 8th grade that I discovered like NoFX and stuff like that. And then I got to high school and there wasn't a single punk rocker. There was like one girl in the 12th grade who had like a Rancid and Misfit sticker on her car. And I was like, oh my God, this girl is so cool. But of course I had never talked to her. She was like living in a totally, you know, different world than my 8th grade self.
Right.
So I had to really dig to uncover like as much information that I could about punk. And I was just like super into it immediately.
Yeah. I love that that assessment that you do when you do enter a new situation. Usually, obviously, like a new school year or something. You know, everyone always has their, you know, picks up their clothes and is like, all right, this is the sort of impression I need to make on the first day. And then, you know, after you've done that, but then you start to kind of like, you know, see the playing field where you start to, like you said, examine who else is out there. Be like, hey, is anybody else receiving this signal? Is anybody else like even remotely interested in this sort of stuff? Like, I'm wearing my NoFX shirt. Anybody else out there? And it's like, yeah, then you find, you, like you said, you find one person and you're just like, oh yeah, there's no way that you'd ever talk to me. You're like 5 years older than me. This is not a normal scenario for me to just go up and talk to you.
Yeah. Like I was looking for like any trace of like subculture in my neighborhood, because like I said, the neighborhood that I grew up in, it's in Vancouver, but it's kind of like a ways away from downtown, and it's like kind of a cultural dead zone. There was me and a couple of my friends who skateboarded, and then there was some kids who wrote graffiti, and then other than that, it was just a complete dead zone. So I was like constantly looking for just like any clue that there was anything going on below the surface. And like even to this day, I can still remember specific instances of like seeing someone on the streets in my neighborhood who looked vaguely punk, or like seeing someone in my neighborhood like with a tattoo. Right. This was before tattoos were like super commonplace, especially in that neighborhood. So it was like such a momentous event at that time just to see someone with like spiked hair or like a like studded bracelet or something like that. Like it was so like, it made such a big impression that I still remember it, like, 20 years later.
Right. Yeah.
Which is hilarious because now, like, all that stuff is, like, so easily accessible.
Right. There are probably similar experiences, but just on a different wavelength that obviously we wouldn't recognize,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You strike me, I mean, not casting any quick judgments on you or anything like that, but you strike me as a very, I guess, reserved and quiet person, where you're not like, hey, look at me, I need to be the center of attention sort of person. Is that accurate at all, or were you kind of, always sort of fading to the background of, a party or anything like that, if you didn't feel comfortable in that situation?
I think that's kind of like it's half accurate. I'm not like a party person. I never have been. And I've always been like pretty shy. But on the other hand, like, look what I've done for the last, 20 years. I've played in bands and like, sang in bands, been the center of attention. So I think there is like a certain like narcissistic side to my personality that's kind of, directly in contradiction to like a more shy like side of my personality, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's because I definitely think it's an interesting notion, because I can see where people such as yourself are coming from, where you enjoy performing, you enjoy getting up in front of people, and you enjoy, the visceral aspect of playing a show and sweating it out and yelling along with people. But then is it one of those things where you feel like you've got to decompress pretty quickly afterwards, or how do you sort of cope with that attention, or was this kind of a learning process for you as people started to be like, oh dude, it's Mark, he's from Goat Alone, like that's pretty awesome? Like how'd you grapple with that?
I mean, I'm like pretty comfortable with people being excited about music that I've made or whatever, because I'm such a fan of music. So it doesn't it's never really tripped me out when people approach me and say like, oh hey, like I really love this record that you did, or like you made a big impact on me growing up, or something like that. Like that sort of thing doesn't trip me out, because I feel the exact same way about so many bands that I was heavily into growing up. So that's, to me, that's totally relatable, and that doesn't like make me uncomfortable or anything like that.
Nice. Yeah, I like the way that you look at that, because it's some people that might be uncomfortable with that notion, can't look at it like that. They're just like, oh, why do you even care about me? Like I'm unimportant. But then if you relate it back to your own head of like, well, no, but I'd be stoked if I met Bob Mould or what, like you're able to kind of flip it back.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I'm not the type of person to go out of my way to meet people that I look up to or stuff like that. Like over the years, I've played so many shows with kind of legendary bands, and I'm usually just content to kind of enjoy them at a distance. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like I usually don't feel the need to like, introduce myself. But when people do it to me, I appreciate it, especially when I feel like they get where I'm coming from, or when I feel like they really get it, because that's kind of rare. There's like many people who have enjoyed music that I've made over the years, but it's actually like pretty rare that I get the impression that they really get it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when that happens, that's like super rewarding. That's one of the most rewarding things.
I will be getting back to the conversation, but I must break in and let you know that the podcast today is sponsored by Zevia. Now you're like, what is Zevia? Like I think I've heard of it. Maybe I've seen the name about. I'm letting you in on some amazing stuff here. So Zevia is a 0-calorie, naturally sweetened soda. There's 15 different flavors to choose from. My personal favorite is black cherry. Just dive into that one first and you'll be like, oh, Ray, this is the elixir of the gods. Thank you so much for putting this past my lips. And you're welcome. Visit Zevia.com/flavors and you can see the, like I said, 15 of these things. Like you'll be able to drink whatever you want. Maybe something like that. Anyways, I also encourage you to visit Zevia.com/podcast. So that's Zevia.com/podcast. There are amazing things going on here. Like I said, 0 calories, no sugar, no artificial sweeteners, no caramel color. There's no GMOs in there, and you can find it anywhere. So go to any grocery store, natural food store, or go to Amazon.com and you can find it there, and you order it and ships it directly to you. Visit the Zevia.com/podcast link because they are giving away some cases. So if you visit that and sign up. There's a good chance that you may get a case on your doorstep. And it was exciting for me because this is a product that I personally have drank many, many times before, but I just didn't drink it for a few years. And so then because they started to show an interest in the podcast and come on as a sponsor, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get back in the saddle. I'm gonna check it out again. What was I missing? I was missing a lot. I actually told my mom, I was like, hey, Mom, it's great. Like, remember that product you showed me like 5 or 6 years ago? I mean, I didn't say product, but I said soda. Remember that thing you showed me, 5, 6 years ago? She's like, yeah. And then I was like, they're taking out ad in the podcast. It's awesome. And she was like, why did you stop drinking it? I was like, you know what? That's my fault. I'm encouraging you to not make the same mistake that I did and stop drinking this stuff. So yes, visit Zevia.com/podcast. That's ZEVIA.com/podcast and just enjoy. You will be able to thank me much later and be like, Ray, you got me onto that stuff. I appreciate that. There you go.
This episode is brought to you by Toyota. We all agree that reducing carbon emissions is a good thing, and once again, Toyota is leading the way. We hear a lot about fully electric vehicles, and Toyota has them, with more on the way. But we also know a BEV is not for everyone, whether it's because of cost, range, or concerns about finding a charging station when you need it. Plus, the raw materials used to manufacture batteries are limited. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future, in vehicles and in manufacturing plants too in the years ahead. The materials used to make just one long-range battery for an EV could be used to make batteries for 6 plug-in hybrids or 90 gas-electric hybrids. That's why Toyota's position today is electrified, diversified, empowering you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint with the vehicle that's right for you. A hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or battery EV. So shop, learn more, and get details at toyota.com/beyond zero. Toyota, let's go places.
I have diabetes. I'm at risk for pneumococcal pneumonia.
I have asthma. I'm at risk too.
If you're 19 or older with chronic conditions like asthma, diabetes, COPD, or heart disease, or are 65 or older, you are at increased risk for pneumococcal pneumonia. Ask your doctor or pharmacist about Prevnar 20, pneumococcal 20-valent conjugate vaccine, a Pfizer vaccine that can help protect you against pneumococcal pneumonia in just one dose. Even if you've already been vaccinated with other pneumonia vaccines, Prevnar 20 may help provide added protection. Prevnar 20 is approved for adults to help prevent infections from 20 strains of the bacteria that cause pneumococcal pneumonia. Continued approval may depend on a supportive study. Don't get Prevnar 20 if you've had a severe allergic reaction to the vaccine or its ingredients. Adults with weakened immune systems may have a lower response to the vaccine. Side effects include pain and swelling at the injection site, fatigue, headache, muscle, and joint pain. For full prescribing information, please call 1-855-213-2138 or visit Prevnar20.com.
Hey, this is Tanya Rad from the Scrubbing In with Becca Tilley and Tanya Rad podcast. You'll know real when you get it. It'll say eBay Authenticity Guarantee, and you'll feel it. Maybe it's a head-turning handbag, a watch that says it all, jewelry that makes you look like the gem, sneakers and streetwear so fresh, every step feels fly. When it comes to style and luxury, eBay gets it. They're making sure the things you love are checked by experts. Not just any experts, specialized experts. Real people who love this stuff with real hands-on authentication experience. So when you see that shiny blue check mark that says Authenticity Guarantee, shop with confidence. Every inch, stitch, sole, and logo is verified, authentic through a detailed inspection. That's how you know that eBay's got your back. Because when you finally step into those sneakers, put on that watch, get your real gold glow up, swing that handbag over your shoulder, or step out in that streetwear, you'll realize that feeling is unlike any other. With eBay Authenticity Guarantee, you can trust that feeling of real is always in reach. Ensure your next purchase is the real deal. Visit ebay.com for terms.
And so then as you were kind of coming to the end of high school and obviously having to, make real life decisions and all that sort of stuff, like did Go It Alone start for you like in high school? And that was for all intent and purposes, like your first, I guess, quote unquote, serious band where you actually, toured and everything like that, right?
I played in like a couple hardcore punk bands before that. One of them was called The Attack, and that was the first band that I was in that ever like released a 7-inch and we did a bunch of tours and stuff like that. That happened when I was 18, like between when I was 18 and 20. So just after high school. And then Go It Alone kicked off when I was 20, I believe.
Got it. And so what were your, did you have quote unquote plans? Like, were you, in regards to like, this is what I would like to do for a job? Or was it like, well, everything is kind of, centered around music, so I'm just going to focus on that and just, have crappy jobs or whatever?
Yeah, I never had any like career aspirations or like a plan in that sense of it. Like, I really hated high school, and my plan was just, as soon as I graduate high school, I'm going full on into an adventurous life, whether that's just like traveling on my own or touring in bands. But I knew that I didn't have any plans to go to college. I didn't have any plans to like get a serious career or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I felt like I had been kind of like confined for 13 years in the education system, and kind of been forced to do something that I didn't want to do, and forced to be in a situation that I didn't enjoy, that I felt stifled by for many, many years. So as soon as I had the opportunity to go do my own thing and like pursue, like I said, an adventurous life, that's what I did immediately.
Interesting. I like the way that you phrase that, where it's like you were just looking for adventure, because I think that a lot of people maybe think that, but maybe they don't describe it as such. They're just like, oh, I just want to do whatever. But it sounds like you obviously had some, for lack of a better term, like a particular focus, where you were just like, you just wanted to travel and be afforded opportunities that were, I guess, outside of the conventions of what you knew.
Yeah. Like, I've never really been like kind of like a shiftless layabout. Like, I've always been like a pretty motivated person. So even though I didn't want to have a career, or didn't want to pursue education, it's not like I wanted to just like sit around on my ass and watch TV or something like that. Like, I wanted to get out there and experience the world,
Right.
And I was always, and at that time I was super into traveling. Like, I went on a bunch of like lengthy bicycle trips when I was young. I was into riding freight trains and hitchhiking and all that sort of thing. So I was out there doing that stuff, like, before I even started touring with bands. Right.
Interesting. So it was kind of the, because I definitely was super into the crime think comet bus scene of, like you're talking about, whatever, dumpster diving. Not like you said that, but I'm saying it, just the kind of, the notion of just seeing the world for, very little money, and just obviously trying to either operate off the kindness of strangers or the network of people that you know. So that's something that you were into, and you explored that?
Yeah, big time. Like, kind of like I was mentioning earlier, like I've, from a very young age, I've always been into like more of the clean cut, like straight edge hardcore kind of thing. But at the same time, I was always like a part of like the punk scene in Vancouver. And especially at that time, that punk scene was like very much revolving around, like you said, like, riding trains, dumpster diving, that sort of lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, I always had I had an interest in that sort of thing, in addition to having an interest in playing hardcore.
It's so strange because there are, for me, I never went down that road, but it was definitely this romantic notion. And I think a lot of that zine culture kind of sprung up around that idea. Like I remember I think it's like Alberian, the bassist of Mile Marker. I know he did a lot of writing in regards to that sort of lifestyle. And so it's definitely romantic, but then me just being kind of the sort of, very practical, I guess, realist, where it's just like, yeah, but then I can't, I can do that for about a day, but then I would need to figure something else out. But obviously, I wouldn't be.
You're a much more reasonable person than me, I think.
So you basically, did you travel around the entire country kind of with that sort of philosophy?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I did a lot of traveling in the States, some traveling in Canada. I went to Europe. I would travel in Europe for like 5 or 6 months. I did a bike trip for a couple months, and then just traveled on my own for an additional few months. So yeah, before Go It Alone started, I spent like, I guess 2 years between graduating high school and really getting busy with Go It Alone. I spent a couple years, traveling a lot. And then when I was in Vancouver, just living in communal punk houses and stuff like that.
Right. Obviously, I'm sure that there are many things you learned during that time, more so, maybe either reflecting on yourself or obviously the world around you. Do you look back at those times, I guess, nostalgically and fondly through like rose-colored glasses, or were there moments where you were like, holy shit, this is really hard? Like, was it a juxtaposition of both?
No, I look back on it really fondly. And to be honest, I don't even look back on it as something that like, I don't even look at it as like a phase from the past. Like, to me, it's still going, like I just spent the last 3 months on a road trip with my girlfriend living in a van. I'm really not that far removed from the type of thing that I was into doing, 15 years ago.
Totally. No, that's cool. Yeah. You're just applying the principle. You're applying what you've learned in the past to be like, oh, I know how this can be, slightly easier or whatever.
Yeah. And as far as looking back on it as being hard, like, I don't think I would ever do that, because certainly there was, kind of rough times. Certainly there's times where I didn't have any food to eat, or I was sleeping on the streets, but that was all self-imposed discomfort. You know what I mean? So I could never claim that I was, truly living like a hard life or anything like that.
Right. Obviously, I mean, I'm not going to document all the steps in Go It Alone's career, but basically, was there, because it seemed to me that a lot of the pressures that start to kind of come down on bands of that nature that obviously start to gain some notoriety within the scene. All right, well, how do we take it seriously? And like other labels are talking to us, and like all the business stuff starts to kind of swirl around you. Was that the case for you guys, or were you always trying to kind of keep it at a sort of manageable, comfortable level? How did that kind of transpire within the internal workings of the band?
Well, to be honest, in Go It Alone, I was mostly concerned with the artistic side of things. Lucas, the drummer, was more of the business-minded, logistical side of things. And at the time, we lived together, so it was really good. It worked out very well. Like, we had both sides of it covered. So, I took an interest in I guess what you would call the business of the band, but that definitely wasn't my main focus. The one thing that I think made it easy is that from pretty early on, we got hooked up with Rivalry Records. It made it quite simple because we were really happy with that situation. We really trusted Kyle, who ran the label. He did a really good job by us. So we didn't really have the impetus to like shop around for different labels. Like I suppose we were approached by at least one bigger label. But we felt loyal to Kyle. Like, he had invested so much in us and put so much work into it that, kind of stayed the course with him.
And so then you obviously did your, well, I wouldn't even call it a project, but you created your I guess, alter ego in Devotion, obviously in between after Go It Alone stopped to exist. And it seems to really address a lot of what you're talking about, the sort of, for lack of a better term, professional wandering that you do. Yeah, maybe you can put that in a business card. You can take that term if you'd like.
Professional wanderer.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like a lot of the experiences that you gathered in doing that were obviously directly related to the lyrical content that you had in Devotion. Is that, am I reading into that too much, or is it definitely reflective over you being able to just kind of solely express your vision like that?
Kind of surprises me to hear you say that. I guess there was a couple songs where that's true, but I felt like with Devotion, with that first Devotion album, I feel like most of the lyrical content is more like on the tip of like questioning the idea of like an afterlife, or questioning various like religious ideas or spiritual ideas, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. I didn't mean to pigeonhole your.
No, that's fine.
Obviously, just because it is your own vision and your own lyrical output, that you could, focus more solely, obviously, on yourself rather than worrying about what other people thought about whatever lyrics you were trying to accomplish.
Oh yeah. I mean, to be honest, with Go It Alone, there was no one really like vetoing what I was writing. Like I felt very free to like express myself in Go It Alone. as well.
When did Black Breath start to exist in your life as well? Like when was, how old were you when that kind of started to kick into gear?
Let's see. Well, Black Breath existed for a number, probably 4 or 5 years before I joined the band.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all friends of mine from Bellingham. Like I said, I grew up in Vancouver. As you may know, Bellingham is a college town in Washington State, just across the border from British Columbia. So it's close to Vancouver. It's in between Vancouver and Seattle. So I spent a lot of time there. So I had a bunch of friends there. And anyways, they started this band, Black Breath, who I was a big fan of. And right about the time that Go It Alone finished, our guitar player, Ace, he joined Black Breath. And at that point, Black Breath kind of like started taking off a little bit. That's when they did their first record and started touring and stuff like that. And then a few years after that, one of their guitar players, Zach, ended up leaving the band. So I replaced him. And I guess that was probably in 2011.
Yeah, just trying to place on the timeline. Because I didn't know exactly when you had landed in on that. It seems like all of the kind of music that you've been involved in also has this, I guess, the ability to be able to focus on it, but not have it consume your life, if that makes sense. You know, where it's like, you know, Black Breath, obviously, you guys, you know, you tour and you're active, but not to the point where you're out, you know, whatever, 300 days out of the year, where it's like some bands, obviously, that's their sole focus, where it's like they want to be existing on the road. You know, say I would equate it to Go It Alone as well, where it's like you guys toured when it obviously made sense and it kind of lined up. Has that always been kind of a, for lack of a better term, a strategic approach to where, you know, you're trying not to get burnt out on the, I guess, the touring lifestyle, or is that just like happenstance?
No, that was never really planned. Like I was, especially with Go It Alone, I was always pushing like to get out on the road as much as possible. And we did. We toured a lot. But we also had to work around, you know, other members' lives. You know, not everyone was like me and Lucas were definitely like fanatical about the band. That for those years, that definitely consumed both of our lives. But we also, you know, over the years, we had other members in the band who were going to school and stuff like that. So it was never feasible to be on tour, you know, all year long. But we would definitely, you know, get out there for, you know, I don't know, 3 or 4 months a year or something like that.
Black Breath seems to have, I guess, for lack of a better term, kind of a similar approach as well, where it isn't the huge grind. Because, you know, obviously, I'm sure you have many friends who have done the touring lifestyle, and then, you know, they reach a certain point where it's just like, hey, you know, this kind of feels like a job. Like this doesn't feel fun anymore. You know, is that somewhat in the mind of obviously where Black Breath stands, where you guys are more selective about what you do?
I think, yeah, but I actually just left Black Breath a couple months ago. But to answer your question, yeah, I think Black Breath is a little more selective. Like there was many tour opportunities that were offered to us. We turned down just because, you know, we weren't really enthusiastic about it, or you know, the bands on the package like weren't really, you know, bands that we were like super excited about. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But at times, you know, it regardless of that, it still becomes a bit of a grind, or it can become a bit of a grind, especially right when an album comes out. There's like your typical touring cycle, or whatever you want to call it, that could be up to 2 years, you know. And it's not like you're on the road every single day for 2 years, but for a lot of that time, for sure.
Right, you have to be prepared for that cycle, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah.
Kind of like, you know, where you're at now. Like you said, it's just kind of a continuation of what you've been doing in regards to just your traveling and the way that you're experiencing life and stuff like that. Is it one of those things like basically you just kind of return home from one of these you know, adventures that you go on, and you just basically like land at a random job and you just kind of, you know, figure it out? Or do you have I guess as you get older, you kind of have more of a focus in regards to what you do or what you want to do? You know, so where's your head kind of sitting at right now?
Well, as far as just landing in random jobs, I was lucky enough to have like a really understanding boss for many years. I've been a bicycle courier for like over 10 years, and my boss is actually a hardcore guy who played in bands and still plays in bands and stuff like that. So he was totally understanding of my need to take time off to go on tour and stuff like that. So that was actually like a really helpful situation for all those years when I was playing Go It Alone and Black Breath and all that stuff. I wasn't getting paid very much, but I had, total freedom to come and go as I pleased. So that was a huge help, because prior to that, it was always a scramble, like coming home from tour and scrambling to get, some crappy minimum wage job for like 2 months before I left again for the next tour,
Mm-hmm. And where, looking forward, like where is it that you are? I guess you plan on just kind of existing in the same philosophy and the same mindset that you have been approaching it, where you just kind of continue to go on these adventures and obviously still wander.
Well, I still want to have an adventurous life, like going into the future for sure. I guess maybe I'm trying to be slightly more reasonable. Right now I'm going through the testing process to try to get a job working for the U.S. Post. So that's not really dissimilar from what I've been doing for many, many years for work, but it's, I guess, a more stable version of the work that I've been doing for years.
Right. Obviously, I mean, I can't tell you how many times that I've seen the horrific bumper stickers, sayings of the not all who wander are lost. Like, I just want to gouge my eyes out every time I see those, because, usually the people that put them on there are, driving some very stereotypical car and are just, anyways, judgment call on my end of things. But, the notion is that obviously for people that do go on these, uncalculated adventures, are searching for something. So like, is it one of those things where do you reflect on that? Like, what am I looking for when I'm going on these adventures? Or is it simply the experience that you're trying to soak in?
I think it's mostly the experience. Like, I'm a very curious person. So I'm always, but I don't know if I would say that I'm searching. I don't know if that's quite accurate. Like, I'm always interested in like experiencing new things and learning new things. But I don't feel like particularly lost or anything like that. Like, I've always been a very focused, driven person, just not career minded,
Mm-hmm.
But I've never just been really like floating through life. You know what I mean? I've always been very focused on accomplishing things. They just happen to be things that don't provide any financial security.
Sure. They just, right. They don't happen to yield the results that people sometimes would expect to be looking for from a life. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the only reason I asked that is because it's just because you have chosen an unconventional path in so many respects of, obviously being attracted to, punk and hardcore to begin with, and independent music in general. That obviously adds a layer of complexity that a lot of other people just don't understand. And then so adding additional layers, whether it's like, veganism, all these other things that you can kind of introduce to your life to, make you more of an outsider, sometimes makes a person obviously more reflective on the world at large, to where it's just like, why have I chosen these things? And it's like, cause you strike me as a pensive person. Like you're thoughtful. So that's the reason why I asked, like, obviously that there is, if there is something that you are, desiring to kind of find out through these journeys. So that was the reason I asked that.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And the last thing I wanted to hit on was basically the, you kind of answered it earlier on, where it was like the, you're reflective over your music, but I guess not overly nostalgic, where you're trying to be like, oh, like, don't listen to that, listen to the newest thing that I've done or whatever. Does it surprise you when people, I guess, still, reach out and obviously have cared about the music that you've either created in the past, or in unexpected places you find people where you're just like, oh, you know my band, like, me? How does that kind of, how does that surprise you?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because just last week, like I said, I just moved here to Oakland, so I've been applying for jobs here. And just last week, I emailed a resume to somebody, and they responded, and they're like, hey, is this, a strange question, is this Mark Palm from Supercrush? So that was definitely the strangest place that I've, that my name has been recognized from my music stuff.
Right.
That was a new one. Not sure if it will help me get the job, but
totally. Is that kind of where you're putting all of your musical energy right now into to Supercrush?
That's Yeah, that's one of the main focuses for sure. Like, we're slowly working on this series of 2-song singles. We've done 2 of them so far.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the songs written for the next one. Hopefully we'll record that maybe in November or December.
Nice.
So that's something that I'm working on. And there's also some bands and projects down here in California that remains to be seen, but hopefully I'll get something going down here soon.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. Well, dude, I really appreciate your time and hanging out. This was a very calm and soothing conversation. I liked. Sometimes I find myself getting like excited, but then you're a calming presence, Mark. Way to go.
Well, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was Mark. Interesting dude, right? I love kind of poking around about his decisions that he's made through his life, and not a judgmental manner, obviously, because you can hear the interview and it speaks for itself. But I just love it because you can tell that he loves what he does. He loves being able to be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna, like travel for a while and just like not worry about real life and obligations and everything else that, normal people worry about. And it's honestly refreshing because there's definitely a bit of, I hate to use the word wanderlust because that's just I don't know. I feel that's something that people put in their Instagram profiles, and I don't even think they really even truly know what that means. But there's an element of that, like I think in all of us, and I know for me in particular, it's like I don't pine over the days of like being on the road anymore because realistically, you couldn't pay me enough money to do a full United States tour for 6 weeks. It just doesn't sound that appealing to me. Maybe like a week tour. Yeah, I can handle that. That's fine. But there is that element of just kind of, throwing caution to the wind and being like, all right, I want to do this because I was obsessed with that for quite some time, for maybe about 2 or 3 years. The whole life of a transient in regards to, like jumping from boxcar to boxcar and finding your way from one place to another with no real plan. Sounds awesome. So anyways, thank you very much to Mark for coordinating this, and thank you very much to our producer, Tom Richfield, as always, for supplanting this idea in my head and pushing me along to get it done. Visit the show's website, 100wordspodcast.com. Visit jabberjawmedia.com. And, next week, I have an idea of what I'm going to release, but I'm not going to say it because there's I've had some minor technical glitches that may prevent it from being released on time. I'm trying to do the year-end episode next week, but I'll keep you posted. So you'll either get the year-end episode or you'll get another interesting conversation. So there you go. Until next week, please be safe, everybody.
This is Holly Fry from Stuff You Missed in History class. Toyota is a leader when it comes to electrified vehicles. Today, battery EVs make up less than 10% of new vehicles sold because of higher cost and concerns about range and charging. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future. With an electrified, diversified lineup of hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and battery EVs, Toyota empowers you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint. Learn more and get details at toyota.com/beyondzero. Toyota, let's go places.
Okay, round 2. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
In the grocery store trenches, the big swindle is nigh, because the grocery stores price all their prices too high. And the grocery store aisles go on forever. Prediction when you'll find canned beets?
How about never?
Members only, the sign says you must have a card, but the sign up.
Why is it always so hard?
But over at Aldi, it's different, you know. We don't hike up our holiday prices. Heck no. Our don'ts mean high quality and savings. It's true. Everything we don't do is for you. It's an Aldi thing.